Hey folks, so today's video is maybe a little different than what I've done so far on this channel, but with what's going on in the world right now, I figured let me I don't know, maybe if by me making this video it gets through to a couple of people, great. So yeah, today's video is talking about knitting and resistance, knitting and politics. Might be controversial. I don't think it should be. And there are probably some of you who, saw the thumbnail, or now that I'm starting to get talking about it, are like, I don't think politics should be involved in knitting. Like, check your privilege. If you're at a point that you can look at just about anything and say, like, politics doesn't play a role in this, you're just wrong, because politics, affects everything, and, there is kind of the politics of knitting and where your money's going and all of that is a whole separate topic. But trying to separate the policies and things that are affecting people in our community from the hobby, you can't do that. And I think it is a very privileged place to kind of be like, I am going to do my little thing and ignore what's going on in the world. That's not to say don't take time for yourself. Like, for me, oftentimes sitting down to knit is how I take a break from the news, how I recharge and take care of myself. Yes, please take care of yourself, but don't completely disengage. Do what you can. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about steps you can take, because I know for me that can be very overwhelming, of seeing all the awful things that are happening and feeling like, what can I do? There are things you can do. And I don't want this to come across as performative actionism. I'm making this because I have this YouTube channel, and maybe there's a couple people that, hey, maybe this video helps show them some resources or helps change their mind and they decide to get active. This is something that I can do in addition to other things that I am doing, and we'll talk about that more. Before we get into modern protests, let's look back at some of the roots of knitting as a political act. And I will say a lot of the things that I'm talking about are being drawn from this really great article, Knitting as Dissent, Female Resistance in America Since the Revolutionary War, by Tove Hermansen. I will make sure to put a link down to that. I found it very interesting. Some of it I knew and some of it was new to me. What has been seen as primarily this female duty or pastime, what nowadays people kind of joke about having their granny hobbies, but knitting has actually a rich history of being a part of political subversion, using kind of these everyday labors as part of political resistance. You look back to the American Revolution and women leaning into creating and doing their own textile work, including knitting, allowed to have some financial freedom from imported British goods. So in that way, it was a little bit of political activism, of being like, we don't have to rely on these British imports. We can be much more independent as a country. That's something that I've seen a little bit nowadays in knitting culture, of embracing a little bit more of the slow fashion, trying to say okay, we're going to make things intentionally and make things that are going to last and that we can take care of, instead of buying into fast fashion, creating a whole bunch of waste, but then also giving your money towards companies who you may not agree with their policies. Then we look a little bit further into history and we see that spinning bees, beyond just starting out as this social event, became a political event. They became places where there could be competitions that drew people in, but then conversations that started, and policies and politics discussed, revolutions kind of planned. And that's something that it helps provide that community event that brings people together who may not originally get together and talk to each other, but because they have this common thing, it provides that structure and that reason to get together that then gets to launch into these bigger conversations. That happens today. the people that I know through my local knitting group, I would not necessarily know if I wasn't part of that knitting group, because we have different jobs, we have different hobbies besides knitting, but knitting brings us together. So I get to hear about their lives and get to talk about my lives and hear their perspectives. So it helps bring us together. And, you know, there have been times where we've talked politics at these events. It's oftentimes kept a little bit of a like politics free, less so because of like, oh, we don't want this to be a politics space, but I think more so because we're often going there for the socializing and like the mental break from a politics conversation. But I have had those conversations when people have been like, yeah, you know what? Let's talk about it. I want to commiserate. I want to talk about like, how are you helping? How can I help? And helping find each other's resources that way. Now, there's plenty of other examples of knitting and fiber crafts being part of some kind of protest or politics. But let's jump ahead to what's going on now. What we're seeing now is knitting being used as an element of this anti-ice movement. There's been this kind of grassroots movement in the US to turn fiber arts into a form of protest against the actions that the U.S. Customs and Enforcement Agency has been taking, particularly in response to the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. In Minneapolis specifically, as well as a few other places across the country, fiber communities have been getting together and turning their regular meetups into protest stitch-alongs. I've seen a couple of things, not specifically in my area, but in other places where people are saying, we're going to go meet up in front of this, you know, city hall or whatever it is, and we're all going to sit down and we're going to stitch together and we're going to protest what is happening in this country. It is a form of peaceful protest. You're seeing patterns like the Melt the Ice hat, and I've seen a lot of other like embroidery and cross stitch with anti-ice messaging that are being created as a form of protest. It's art, and it's also a form of protest because it's fiber art. It's not just a craft. That's a topic for another video. So we're seeing some of these fiber crafters linking their arts and their crafts to this wider street protest, to these wider protests over the completely inhumane operations that ICE has been doing, not only with the recent murders that have happened, but the way that people are being treated, the way people are being taken off the street by unmasked, unmarked officials with no due diligence and shipped off to concentration camps. That is what they are. They're being called something else, but when you look at it, when you look at history, that's what they are. And it's wrong, and it shouldn't be happening. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the history of the Melt the Ice hat. So during World War II, in Norway specifically, people began knitting and wearing these pointed red hats as a symbol of protest against the Nazi occupation. It got to the point that the Nazis banned red hats entirely. Then you started seeing these like gnomes with red hats popping up on Christmas cards. Those red hatted gnomes were also a symbol of Nazi resistance. I didn't know that until all of this happened. It worked because it was a symbol of dissent. It was a way of symbolizing and recognizing, I don't agree with this. So that is why the red hat, the pointed red knit hat patterns or crocheted patterns have been resurging as a way of using this tradition again. Identifying that, you know, what's going on right now in the country is not okay, that it has similarities to Nazi activity, not okay, it's fascist, it's like shouldn't be happening, and it's a form of protest. Now, I have seen some talk about, can it be blue, should it be a different color, just because of the MAGA red hats. But I think this is also a way to reclaim red hats, and specifically this knit red hat. It's not a red baseball hat. as a form of protest. We also look at recent history of like the pussy hats that were made in like the Women's March as another form of utilizing our hobbies, our craft as a form of protest. Now, something that I know specifically came up with a lot of the pussy hats is performative actionism. People were creating these hats and selling them, or coming up with patterns and selling them, and kind of financially profiting from this political resistance. And I have seen some lashback with the Melt the Ice hat. I know initially they said they were going to raise funds and didn't specify on where it was going, and some people were not pleased that it was going where they decided to give all of the funds to. I think just hindsight, it might have been good to say like where are the funds going ahead of time, but they did donate the funds to actually making a difference. So I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, and I don't fault them at all for that. Like I also don't think they expected the pattern to raise $500,000. So I think something to keep in mind if you're looking to knit up red hats and be involved is just be aware of, are you doing it because, oh, this is something I can do, and then I can be like, I did the thing, I don't have to do anything more, and like pat yourself on the back? Or are you saying, this is something that I can contribute, this is within my resources, and I'm going to do other things to help? Everybody's going to be different in what they can do. I have not been participating in like marches or stuff like that, especially recently, because like I have a small child I have to keep care of, and I'm not going to bring a 3-year-old out there, as well as I'm a person who gets very anxious in large crowds, so I don't want to have a panic attack in the middle of a protest. Like, I don't think that's also going to be helping the cause. But there are things that I have been doing. I've been calling my representatives and letting them know how I feel and how I think they should be voting, that they should be putting a stop to the activities that ICE has been doing. I am trying to share information, making sure like, okay, let's check the sources, let's check that it's valid information before I share it, so that people in my community have resources, know where to go. And something else I can do is to put my money where my mouth is. And I'm going to be making a donation to the National Immigration Law Center from all of the ads proceeds that this channel gets for January and February. I'm going to be donating there. So I highly encourage you to, I'll put a couple of different charities down in the comments. There are also a lot of local charities that are doing really great work providing legal representation, helping to provide financial support, food to individuals who are not feeling safe enough to leave their homes right now. There are a lot of places that even if you can't physically get out, you can be doing something. You can, even if you don't have the budget to be able to donate to any charities, call your representatives. Go to 5 calls and do that every day, or do that as many times that you can. There are things that you can do. And I think that's something that like I have been trying to focus on. It can feel so overwhelming to look at the news, to look at what's going on in this country and feel hopeless and feel helpless. Because yes, I'm not going to be able to change it myself. There is nothing that I can do to change what's going on. But I can do something. I can do something to help people in my community. I can do something to help sway a politician to change their vote. I can even knit hats. I can knit hats, and I can, make sure that people are warm. People who are going out and protesting, it's so cold right now, so even just providing hats, or if you know people who are out marching, making sure that they've got warm hands, warm heads, bringing them a hot cup of coffee or cocoa, making sure that they're staying warm while they're out protesting. That is something you can do. That is helping in some way. And talk to the people in your community. When you're having these knitting meetups, maybe you help organize one of these meetups as a protest stitch along, or just talk to the people in your community and talk about what's going on. Because even if you're an individual who has supported the current administration in the past, you can change. You can decide, I've had enough. This isn't what I voted for. This isn't what I support. And you can change. And if we can help enough people change their mind, that's eventually going to make a difference. And I think I've said this before, but through all of this, it's also important to be taking care of yourself. I'm not advocating to completely check out and not be involved, but in order to show up, you have to take care of yourself so you can show up. For me, sometimes that is setting down my phone, picking up my knitting, and saying, okay, I can't do anything about what's going on in the world right now. I have to go take care of a 3-year-old in a few minutes, and I need a few minutes to recenter myself. I'm going to focus on my knitting. I'm going to focus on one stitch at a time. I'm going to go take care of my kiddo, and then I will sit down and look at, what can I do? What is the one stitch action that I can do today that helps? So I really hope that you join me in finding ways that you can help be active, because knitting is and always will be political. You can't separate it. Like, it's all part of life, and it's all, as this channel is called, it's all tangled up together. So in some way or the other, it's always going to be political. I will put links to resources to the Melt the Ice pattern, as well as charities to 5 calls down in the description, so you can help use that as a resource if you're in a place of not knowing where to start. Hey, this gives you at least a starting point. I hope you are safe. I hope you're taking care of yourself and your community. We should be taking care of each other right now. That's not happening on a government scale, and I hope that changes soon. But we can take care of each other. We can show each other that what's happening with ICE, what's happening with the administration in the United States, is not who we are. And we're not okay with it, and we want to see change. So I don't really know how to end this. Take care of each other. Take care of yourself. Fuck ICE. And I'll see you next time. Bye.